Hi everyone, welcome to the week 4 overview video for EDSS379 and EDSS223. So this will be the last week that I do a combined overview video for both units because following this week, 379 continues on with geography and 223 continues on with history. And again, the reason why these two units are a little bit different is dependent on the course that you are in. So this week we are looking at teaching history from various perspectives. This is a very important week, not only because it informs part of your first assignment, but because teaching perspectives is really important in history, but also in geography. It is particularly important that we spend a whole week looking at this because teaching from various perspectives is not an easy task. Having students analyze sources is not an easy task. So I want to spend this week ensuring that we are prepared to do this in the classroom. So last week for both units, we looked at the history content. We also looked at skills and a little bit of resources. Those of you in 223, we will be coming back to skills and resources again. And we will probably spend a little bit of time this week as well thinking about skills. In fact, I'm always going to be coming back to talking about skills because it's just really, really important. And as I've said before, probably multiple times, what we really want to impart to our students is the teaching and development of these skills. It's not that they remember dates. It's not that they remember specific details about a point in time in history. Those things are important, but those aren't the things that students are going to remember when they go on to the next year level. I mean, they might, and that would be really great, but what we really need them to attain is the development of skills. So, if anything, because again, we can have a really great learning activity that's going to teach students some great content from the syllabus about the past. But if the students do not have the skills, the learning activity will fall apart. So that's why I spent a lot of time talking about skills. So last week, I invited you to have a deep dive into the history syllabus. If you haven't done that yet, be sure that you take the time to look through stages 1 to 3 and look at the topics that you will be required to teach. It may be that you teach 1 or 2 year levels more than others. You may be more suited to the younger years. You may be more suited to the upper years. It's still important to become familiar with the different units of work that you could potentially teach. Not only because you could potentially teach them, but also because it's important to learn what students have learned prior to coming to your class or where they will continue. On that note as well, you may wish to look at what students are looking at in secondary school. So, thinking about the historical content, in both units, you will find that there was a dissection video, 30 minutes long. I walk you through the syllabus unless you're pretty comfortable with navigating through it. I know some students are just really overwhelmed by this document, and that's why I've put this together. I do this again for the geography as well, but right now we're just talking about history. So this is a good video to, I think, help you navigate through and not just feel so overwhelmed with so much content. So for 379, there were 3 lectures, and for 223, there were 2 lectures. Making sure that you get through those. There's also the quiz that you would have done and opening up those topic notes. So for this week, for both units, we are going to be having 2 lectures. So the first lecture is delivered by Dr. Graham Burke, who was on this teaching team up until only a couple of years ago, but he delivers a fantastic lecture on the teaching of history from various perspectives and gives you an example of how you can teach history and teach the concept of perspectives in a unit of work in primary school. So he goes through that, and that can help you with the first assignment. So be sure to make sure you watch that first lecture. In the second lecture, I go through a little bit more about teaching of perspectives, and I also ask you to consider the problem of perspectives in the history classroom. So there's often disagreement on what we mean about perspectives and how to teach it. So that's an interesting article. You can have a look at that prior to watching part B, or while you're listening to the lecture, you can have a look at that document. So it's quite interesting to think about that. Some teachers think perspectives is this, and others think it's something else, and what that means while we're teaching in the classroom, and what it means for what our students are learning. So interesting to think about that. So again, there's a quiz here for you to complete in order to open up the topic notes. Again, we have the documents there to help you through the lecture if you want them. There's also a document here on embedding Aboriginal perspectives in the classroom. So that obviously has to do with perspectives. So that's something we need to be thinking about as well. And there'll be some topic for discussion questions. Now, if we go back to last week, both units of work had some questions here on the forum. Before I just have a look at what we did, both in the tutorials and what some of you would have done on a discussion forum, I'll just go through the other support material here. The changing curriculum document, we will come back to that again when we look at geography, whether that's in the second half of 379 or in T1 in 324. For those of you in 223. A good idea to have this on board, having a look through it. We critiqued it in the on-campus tutorial and sort of pulled it apart a little bit and talked about some of the discrepancies, things that we didn't like too much, things that we thought were quite good. So you should also be doing the same as well. Until we get the new syllabuses in New South Wales, this is all we have. We don't really know what it's going to look like, but we can get kind of an idea based on this changing curriculum document. All right, so there's also a couple of TikTok style videos to give you some examples of how we teach analysis and use of sources, and just to really embed the idea of what the history skills are. Remembering that the history skills are those on this continuum table that we looked at in both of the tutorials, always coming back to these skills: comprehension, analysis and use of sources, perspectives and interpretations, empathetic understanding, research, explanation, and communication. Some of these might be a little bit more difficult to teach to students, and some might be a little bit easier. Depends on the class, depends on your skills as a teacher, and it really does depend. So good idea to be keeping this continuum table close by and having a think about how we can teach each of these skills to our students. So the discussion forum last week and in the tutorials, the types of questions that we looked at were first impressions of the history syllabus. Many students thought it was well organized when we looked at the syllabus, especially in comparison to maybe a CARA, where some, including myself, find it a little bit confusing to navigate through. So this history syllabus for New South Wales does have that positive with it, I suppose. It's quite easy to navigate. We looked at the historical skills and also the concepts and discussed which ones we would think would be a little bit more difficult to teach and why that might be. Perspectives and empathetic understanding came up in the tutorials as being difficult to teach as a skill and also as a concept. So that's interesting to think about. I personally always found analysis and use of sources very difficult to teach students, and also research too. We talked a little bit about what that looks like in the classroom, what types of sources we are directing students to use, and how we teach them to identify appropriate sources, although as teachers, we usually will provide them with sources. In addition to that, once a student has a source that they're reading through or analyzing, whether that's a visual text, an image, or so forth and so forth, whether that's a visual text or a visual image, we also need to teach students how to comprehend. So how is what they're reading actually answering the question on what they're trying to seek the answer to? So a lot of these go together, don't they? We analyze sources in order to understand perspectives. In order to understand perspectives, we need to have some sort of bit of empathetic understanding. In order to properly research, we often need to be able to comprehend what we're reading. So they're all interlinked. And if we look at the concepts too, we talked about how some of these are interlinked as well. Continuity and change and cause and effect are usually not identified as very difficult concepts to understand because they are quite linear. They are quite, they're they're less abstract than the others, so they're often identified as less difficult to teach students. But these ones here, significance, contestability, empathetic understanding and perspectives, not an easy feat for our young students. We talked about how sources become evidence in history. We looked at this concept wheel to make connections between different concepts. We also looked through the changing curriculum document. Now, in the on-campus tutorial, we didn't get a chance to do this learning activity, but we're going to do it at the start of next week. But I think the second tutorial was able to get through it. So if you aren't able to attend the tutorials, I still encourage you to attempt this. And if you want to share it with me and get some feedback, I'm happy to do that because that can help prepare you for the first assignment. After this, you should have a look at this video here and have a look at what types of skills students would be engaged in. So if you play that, I think it's only a minute or two long, and the teacher who is in this video is actually Fussell, who is from the Porter and Fussell reading that you do in week 2 on inquiry learning. All right, so again, moving on to this week, we are looking at teaching from various perspectives. A lot to think about this week. We are going to continue thinking about the concepts, topics, and skills, and where in different units of work perspectives could be taught. We will be looking through the syllabus, looking at that. Remember that in the assignment, you will also be looking at perspectives. If you're looking for additional readings outside of the unit schedule on, to support you on perspectives and also the analysis and use of sources, which are often quite interlinked and will help you for that first assignment, I bring you back to this website, which I'm pretty sure I presented in the assignment 1 overview video, and I also use it and share a video in the part B for lecture 4 this week. There's a lot of resources here. Now, a lot of them are really sort of more for high school teachers, but if you are unsure about how to analyze sources and you don't know what that entails, this can be a great starting point. Going to source criticism, thinking about comprehension, interpretation. So written sources, photographs, cartoons, analysis. So what sort of things are we looking at when we're analyzing sources? We're looking at what type of source it is, who's created it, when it was created. So was it created at the time or many years later? The context, the audience, the purpose, the perspective, the bias, and so forth. And as I said in lecture 4, part A, Dr. Graham Burke goes through most of these ways of analyzing a painting and also a diary entry, I believe, by Captain Cook. So this can help you to understand a little bit more about what we're doing when we're asking students to analyze a source in order to identify different perspectives. If you want more information on what perspectives is all about, I believe there is also information here on that. So just under source criticism, under analysis, there's a whole section on perspective as well. And I believe I share one of these videos 1 week, but you can come in here and have a look again if you'd like. Some videos and information on identifying perspectives in work. What is a source's perspective? The problem of perspective in history. Yeah, that's the article that I go through in the lecture part B. What's the difference between perspective and bias, and the difference between opinion and bias? Maybe those are some things that we can talk about this week as well. We'll wait to see what questions go up on the discussion forum. So I believe that's it for me. The final thing that I'll say is that for those of you who are in EDSS223, Monday, July the 15th is by 11:59 p.m. is the last time that you can complete the quiz, and only half of the class has completed the quiz. So please be sure to get in there and do that. Other than that, that is it for me. Let's talk various perspectives this week, and I'm really looking forward to it because it's really important in HSIE and HAS. All right, have a good one, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.